Hi folks, with Taskless today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the issue of chain migration, as it's called in the United States, or family reunification, as it's called in other parts of the world. So I was digging through some numbers, and the governments all over the Western world deliberately and purposefully obfuscate the numbers and split up subsets, then recreate the subsets in another page. So it's very hard actually to drill down and get the numbers. Anyway, having a decent sort of understanding of stats and how they're put together, I was able to reasonably quickly, I guess, work out that on average, each mass migrant to the West will, in the first 10 years of their arrival or gaining of some sort of residency or legal status, they will each of them bring out 3.5 family members. Now, if you drill down the numbers, you'd say, well, what if the guy's married and he leaves behind, say, a wife and 2 or 3 children? Then he would obviously want to bring those over. So bring them into whichever rich white country he's run to, and so that would be where the numbers come from. But actually, it's not quite so simple. Most of the supposed refugees, alleged asylum seekers, mass migrants, most of them are single young men. And they're not married and they have no children, so they tend to bring out, say, they marry a bride, or if it's a woman, a husband from the village of their ancestors. So it's an arranged marriage. Now, often they're coming to the West with that arranged marriage already in place. So it's a big selling point to someone saying, well, you ought to, be betrothed to this guy because he's going to go to the West and freeload and parasite off that rich white country, and then you can come out too, and you too can parasite and freeload off the rich white country. So they're coming out with a pre-arranged marriage already in place, but they're single at the time they arrive, and so they'll bring out a woman, say the wife, or the newly arranged or pre-arranged wife, and then they'll bring out, say, another 2 or 3 relatives on top of that. Now, remember the chain the chain migration is per person. So if say a married couple comes to the West or manages to get to the West, then they bring out 7 people. So 3.5 each. So the average is 3.5 per person who comes. And this seems to sort of hold true whether the person is 18 when they arrive, or whether they're 30, or whether they arrive as an intact family unit with mum, dad, and 2 or 3 children or so. They still bring out. Then you add on top of that their procreation once they're in the West, and so one, depending on where they come from, one person coming to the West as an alleged refugee with a very, very low bar that they have to meet in order to qualify as a refugee, and then thus as a resident and later on a citizen. That one person is then bringing out, on average, 3.5 people, and then procreates as quickly as they can with another 3.6, I think it is, about the same. So one person actually is worth 7, and 2 people is also worth 11, and so on. So this is the wider effect of chain migration. Now, the second aspect of chain migration and family reunion, again, as it's called in Australia, is that any requirement at all that other migrants may have to meet, such as they speak English, or they they've got some sort of qualification or work experience or something like that, they don't have to meet any of that. They have a 0 bar to meet, nothing. They can be illiterate in their own language, have never worked, never do anything, nothing at all, absolute zero bar to meet, and they can still be brought out. Now, technically, the person bringing them out has to sort of sponsor them in a way. So well, they've got X amount of money in the bank. So they go to special scam merchant hustler brokers that loan them $250,000 or whatever the threshold amount of money is. So they can say to the immigration, look, I've got $250,000. I can look after my. Now, there's no checking on how on earth would an illiterate peasant cleaner make $250,000 in just a few years of arriving in Australia. How exactly would they do that? Let's have a look at their tax returns and all that sort of stuff, and they could conclude instantly that it would be impossible for this person to have made and saved that sort of money. So, but they don't do that. None of that checking seems to take place. So the scam merchant can loan $250,000 there. As soon as the immigration department ticks off on it, then the $250,000 goes back to the loan, the person or people or group or business that loaned it. So it's a complete round robin scam. And you could, it's so obvious it's a scam, and yet somehow the authorities seem unable and powerless to prevent it, suggesting that they're actually co-conspirators to the fraud, in my view. So anyway, this is so I just wanted to just bring home here. Now, when you look at the amount of sort of migrants to Australia, over 500,000 last year, and the tiny proportion of those that are economically viable. Now, you say, well, hold on, 500,000, and I'll just use round numbers here, 500,000 of migrants came in, but less than 15,000 are economically viable from the time they walk in the door. Why would you bring out close to 500,000 people that are not economically viable? How is that even possible? And a lot of this is family reunion, chain migration, and they bury the overall numbers or within the overall numbers. So if someone comes out as a refugee, then they're entitled to bring out relatives, or an asylum seeker they're entitled to. But then they can be a resident. In some cases, students can bring out one or two dependents, the amount of people that are brought in under this chain migration, under the different categories. So student, then they become a resident, or the refugee or asylum seeker, or they become a citizen. And so under all these categories, they can bring relatives out. But as a student, they may bring out one. Then as a resident, they may bring out two. Then as a citizen, they may bring out another two or three. And then all those people can bring out relatives as well. And again, it's a very low bar. So the illiterate peasant can get to Australia as a relative of someone who maybe did meet some sort of standard, but then that illiterate peasant can then bring out their relatives, and on it goes. So you can have entire households where there may be 3 or 4 generations of people there, all of whom are illiterate peasants, all brought out under this chain migration. And the cost to the community is pretty high. And I've taken relatives to hospital and doctor's surgeries and so on, and relatives that are really too old to sort of get themselves there, and they don't have their faculties to the extent where they can actually deal with the difficult people that you inevitably find at these places. And so I look at the queues and the standing in line of people that are there freeloading off the hospital, because if you try and go to a doctor's thing, you've got to have a medical membership card, and they've cracked down on it quite a lot because of the fraud that goes on there. One Chinese person will get a medical card and they'll share it out amongst all their buddies. And so they can all get free medical. So there's quite a bit of clamp down on that. You've got to show the driver's license. You've got to have photo ID and this and that. So same for the Indians. Huge scams and fraud going on there with pharmaceuticals as well. You go to some of the chemists, like the pharmaceutical shops, and you see Chinese, not so much the Indians here, but them too. But the Chinese is just legion, where they'll have like a grocery store shopping trolley, packed high. They've got to put their hand on the top to stop things from falling off. Packed high with pharmaceuticals. That's all to go back to China or somewhere. And this is all subsidised by the Australian taxpayer, for goodness sakes. So the cost of you're going to, say, the hospital is that you've got a long line of people in front of you, none of whom speak English. Interpreters have to be arranged, all sorts of carry on. So you can spend hours there in standing in line, just because of the huge inefficiencies and the cumbersome nature of having to deal with so many illiterate peasants that don't speak English. Similarly, even when they find interpreters, these peasants are so illiterate, again, in their own language, and so simple, and so they've been just come from the subsistence existence on a farm. They've lived in a mud hut all their lives, and they've got no concept of so many things that are part of a first world country. So I can hear, and I speak some Mandarin, so I can hear the exasperation of the interpreters trying to understand what the Chinese peasant wants, or what they're trying to communicate, or what they need, and so on. And so it's a difficult time-consuming business. So all these extra expenses and handouts and gifts that have to be given, and these third world people, they're onto the game of, say, charities that have soup kitchens that go around to the poorer places in town and the city to help the homeless, and these people turn up in a whole busload of them will turn up to get the free food, and they're not homeless people. They're just there. So the level of parasitic effect of all these people coming in, and again, the chain migration is huge. Now, if the standards were upheld, the supposed standards that the lying politicians claimed existed, where all these people have to speak good English, and they have to have recognised qualifications and recognised job experience, and they have to have qualification experience in areas where the economy is needs those sort of skills. If that were the case, then I'd have no problem with it. I don't mind if skilled people from the third world come out here to come to Australia, or the first world, and skills that are needed, and there are jobs waiting for them. I don't care. I'd rather they stayed in their own country and helped build that up. But we need to understand the numbers will be very small coming in. So again, in Australia's case, there'd be somewhere between 10 and 20,000 per year, maximum. 20,000 being generous, by the way. 10 and 20,000 people that actually have qualifications, skills, speak good English, and can walk straight in the door. And most of those people will be white anyway. So I've got no problem with that. But that's the extent of it. So as soon as we move to a skills-based or a merit-based, call it what you like, then the numbers will fall off. And I don't believe, other than immediate family, as in, wife, husband, child, that's other than that, they shouldn't be added. Now, for the Indians and the many of the Chinese, but particularly the Indians in this case, if they can't bring out all their relatives, Pakistanis and so on, if they can't bring out all their relatives and their pre-arranged marriage brides and all this stuff, they won't come to the West. They consider that absolutely a mandatory requirement for coming to the West, that they can be guaranteed that sort of outcome. And if you deny them that outcome, they won't come. And those that are here under working visas or student visas or temporary resident, they'll just leave because to them it would be an untenable situation. So here's an easy way to reverse the mass migration, is just to say no arranged marriages, it's not on, and you can't bring out any relatives. You do that and bingo, there'd be this massive wave of people out of the country. None of these people, by the way, are productive people doing doing real serious work and wanting to integrate, that none of those people who would leave would be wanting to assimilate into Western culture at all, or society. You've been with Tassos today in the Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.